Cheat on me? At least remember to turn the security cameras off first. My relationship with my husband was once truly blissful. We were in love, our intimate life was great, family and friends meshed perfectly, and we resolved issues instead of letting them fester. However, I have now learned my husband was cheating on me with his ex-wife. My sister-in-law Mary and I uncovered the truth together. My husband was attentive, doting, and wanted more children, yet he still betrayed my trust. I'm at a loss to understand why he would choose this path, especially when we were talking about expanding our family. All I know for certain is that my once happy marriage has now been shattered. Around the same time, I had to go on a business trip. I spent that time in a nauseous fog, partly because I was drinking alone in my hotel room and partly because I watched them going at it from our security cameras. The scumbag had switched them off for privacy, as I'm sure he does often. They were taking full advantage of the fact that the kids and I were away. It was truly sickening, but at the same time, I couldn't turn it off. There were times his ex would try to convince him to break things off with me, but he was always very angry at that idea. She pouted, he apologized, and they went back at it. They had that same argument almost every day. I couldn't understand why he got angry at that idea. Surely that would have been better than to cheat on me? Well, when I finally had to come back home, I was surprised by Mary, who had an adorable new nephew, a new addition to my already big family. At first, she lectured me as any big sister would for ignoring her when it came to the topic of my husband, then she surprised me by pulling out a business card for a private investigator. I guess working in law enforcement has allowed her to meet some pretty useful people, and this guy has been on my case since the very day we found out. Mary was relieved at how well I took the news about the private investigator. She was afraid I was going to stay with him and she thought hiring one was overstepping. I think she passed overstepping back in high school when half my closest was in her room. We talked more about how I was feeling and how heartbreaking the news would be to our kids. My husband's side of the family is very small, and the kids' mother's side of the family has held a grudge over my husband remarrying someone nearly 10 years younger. From what our kids tell us, they would often talk mess about me and my family. Eventually, they had enough, and contact with that family was low. Whereas my side of the family is rather big, filled with other teens their age, and most of them even go to school together. Our kids have bonded immensely with my family, and my parents treat them just like any of their other grandchildren. I know this news will devastate them, but I also know my family wouldn't just drop them simply because I'm not married to their father anymore. After she left, I realized I had to be done with the pity party. I've had weeks to cry and I now needed to get my life in order. The sooner the better. So I got in touch with the private investigator. We met for lunch in a small cafe, and after a general conversation for a few minutes, he handed me a USB stick. He had his laptop ready to show me, but I declined. I'd already seen enough and I didn't want to see any more. I thanked him for his time. I tried to pay him, but Mary had already beat me to it. Shortly after lunch, my dear husband called me to say he would be late. Now normally I wouldn't think twice, as we both have demanding jobs, and working late wasn't uncommon. But now I know he's most likely going to see his ex. This not only angered me more, but it motivated me more too. After the call, I ended up arranging dinner with my close friend and her wife. We got to talking after dinner and I informed her I would be needing her services. She's in family law and her wife's is too. I basically broke down the last few weeks of my life, including the memory stick I had gotten from the private investigator, evidence from our security camera footage, and of course our prenup, which had been locked away in our safe. We have 2 safes in the house, and the one that has our documents in is never in use, so I know he won't be wondering where it is at any point in time. I dreaded the end of the night. Of course, I could go to my parents' house or any of the brothers or aunts, but that would open a ton of questions I wasn't ready to answer. So instead, once again I had to go back home, now waiting for the divorce to be filed before making my next move. As much as I love my family and friends, I've never wanted to be a burden to anyone, and I would hate to be that person who only speaks about her divorce. Although I'm pretty sure my family would punch me for ever thinking I'm a burden.